But the core of the new campus was not only the most politically charged space of the city university in its housing of the aforementioned conference, it was also the epitome of a collaboration that might fall under the rubric integration of the arts, Villanueva's highest aspiration, and not just synthesis of the arts. The term integration seems to appear in Villanueva's writings towards the mid-50s. In 1957, in an article addressing the problem of integration, he underlines the great difference between decoration and integration, a distinction which is not considered in the 1952 letters addressed to the institutional authorities. Decoration, Villanueva argued here, is superficial, a superposition, and as such, useless and even hostile to architecture's ends. Quote, integration instead is the product not only of the comprehension of the common purposes, but also of the necessary subordination amongst the different expressions. It is the creation of a new architectonic, sculptural, pictorial organism where no indecision can be detected. The necessity of each plastic valuation is irremediable evident, end quote. By 1962, the theme of the synthesis of the arts, so passionately promoted in France and Italy during the 50s, was on its way to become a corporate aesthetic and could be seen in need of historicity. In October of that year, at the Royaumont Abbey, a colloquium entitled The Unity of the Arts, History of an Epoch, 1890 to 1962, attests to its status as an object of study. In this occasion, Villanueva, invited to present on the synthesis of the arts, established a difference between synthesis and integration by referring to the first as a confluence of traditional painting and sculpture in the architectural space, which gives body to a new unity in quality, but old in its characteristics. In this case, he writes, clearly aware of art's subservient status, architectural primacy reigns, and the arts concur to enhance something that exists previously. Instead, Villanueva posites integration as a process in which there is no previous frame and in which a common attitude towards human work gives, quote, unitary significance with formal cohesion to the functional and spatial world of the citizen, end quote. Most importantly, he adds, quote, at the heart of integration, there will be the process of mechanical production and a new system of socioeconomic relations, end quote, which is to amplify the orbit of industrial design. Generally alluding to the development of industrial design in Italy, Villanueva, in this paper, insisted on the industrial foundation of artistic integration and the capacity of this dialectic to become the only artistic form of mass communication. An echoing the techno-scientific approach to integration of Pierre-Franck Castel and others such as Michel Ragon, whom the architect probably knew, and in what seems to be a response to the effect of industrial technique on architecture as well as the rise of mass production, Villanueva concluded that, quote, the architecture of tomorrow will be industrial or it will not be, end quote. Historians, of course, have noted the uniqueness of the auditorium among the different artistic interventions that took place in Villanueva's campus. Worked out in conjunction among Villanueva, acoustic engineer Robert Newman, and Calder, the auditorium was the epitome of functional plasticity. In the early correspondence on the project, Villanueva openly talks about decoration and interior design regarding the role of the art he wants to have in the campus. However, in the aforementioned letter to the Institute, Villanueva isolates the Aula Magna as the place where decoration will have to enter in dialogue with the acoustics of the place. 10 days later, Calder writes a letter to Villanueva stating that his intervention will not interfere with the acoustics, a sign that in its initial stages, the idea of Calder's flying saucers, as he called them, functioning as acoustic devices hadn't been fully addressed. Follow-up letters between Newman and Calder suggest that Villanueva and the acoustic engineer had much to do with veering the arts towards functionality. And by July of 1952, there is talk of hanging reflectors and later of reflective panels. The rich epistolary exchange attests to a true dialogue with Calder, whom seems to have been involved in all formal and technical discussions. By November of 1952, detailed technical drawings of Calder's sailing panels are redrafted in the office of Robert Newman. In them, 29 panels are classified and distributed according to a very simple topology. Panels of flat, convex, and concave surfaces designed to support the acoustics of the fan-shaped auditorium constituted by a large vaulted ceiling construction with curved rear walls. The final 31 clouds, or flying saucers, as the devices came to be known, were, according to a letter read in a meeting conference in the office of consulting engineer Edward Ashley, made of a frame consisting of steel channels covered by a metal lath to which was applied a layer of gypsum plaster. Undated documents in Villanueva's archives refer to the acoustic panels as key in facilitating the balanced distribution of sound across the space, their size, their thickness, and their form, designed to facilitate acoustic reception and transmission while achieving plastic form. It is this indissoluble fusion between artistic effect and functionality, between ideation and practicality, art and industry, that provided Villanueva with material to rethink decoration into synthesis and the latter into integration. But integration, I will argue, was sustained in the architectural continuum between the covered plaza and the auditorium. The latter rehearsed further the dissolution of perceptual boundaries materially in place in the public space of the covered plaza. From this open, dilated space, Villanueva wrote, one comes through the ramps to a more concentrated movement intensified by the radial structure of the foyer. Indeed, the malleability and pliancy of the auditorium, the kinetic pulsations of the clouds, and the constant shifting views of the space echoed the dynamic parallax of the covered plaza, just right outside the aula magna. The panels fulfill a tripartite purpose. They were fully functional as they supported the acoustical requirements of the fan-shaped auditorium. They undid the box-like structure of conventional architecture in order to shatter static perception, and they intensified the disintegrating quality of the covered plaza, the more public equivalent of the aula magna. The latent mobility triggered by the arched plane of the clouds, their scattered organization and fragmented effect, which, by the way, the acoustic engineers celebrated for functional reasons, made use of the spectators' mobility and the perceptual participation of viewers in ways unforeseen but announced by Calder's mobiles. The clouds, perceivable from anywhere, comprehensible from nowhere, expanded further the already open and generously wide open space of the tier seating area, foregrounding the democratic access to the stage that a public theater should feature. Accordingly, the auditorium feels limitless. In Villanueva's words, without dimension or direction, despite the hermetic closure that the acoustic requires. If the aula magna was, as Sibyl Moholy-Nagy, who wrote the first book on Villanueva's City University, if the aula magna was the core of the City University, the surrounding covered plaza expands and spreads out, counteracting and complementing the intense pulsations of the celestial bolt structure of the auditorium. And Villanueva, acknowledging the relationship between the inside and the outside, wrote, quote, in the covered plaza, it was necessary to prepare the ambient of the auditoriums. Color had to be spatial, and there was the need to compose with the movement, space-time, end quote.